Welcome everyone to today's exciting MOOC session on what the world needs now is Agile testing with Tricentis Tosca. Before we begin, let me first introduce you to our hosts for this session. My name is Lydia Wazir and I am a training consultant at the Tricentis Academy. Joining me today is the amazing Helmut Stober, who is a PSO team lead and a managing consultant at Tricentis. Helmut has been with Tricentis for over 7 years and is an expert on Tosca. Thank you for joining us today, Helmut.
Thank you too. I'm very happy to be here.
Before we start looking at Agile testing with Tricentis Tosca, let me first discuss some general housekeeping rules for those joining us for the first time. Please note that all participants will be muted during the session. As there are hundreds of you currently attending, everyone talking would be confusing and hard to follow. There is a control panel at the bottom of your screen with apps you can toggle on or off. The key ones are the Q&A, Twitter, Share, and the media player. Even though you are muted, we do encourage you to ask questions during the session, so please use the Q&A box for that. There will be a Q&A session at the end of the MOOC, and we will hold the most interesting questions for the Q&A session so that everyone can profit from the answers. We will try to answer as many questions as possible during the session, but please be aware that only questions related to the current topics will be covered. Please also keep in mind that, given the number of attendees, we might not be able to answer all of your questions during the session. And lastly, this session will be recorded and will be shared on our website later this week. As always, if you stay with us till the end of the session, and it will be hard not to with such an exciting topic, you will receive vouchers for 2 free courses in a separate email after the session is over. I will now hand over to Helmut, who will introduce us to this exciting topic. Helmut?
Thanks, Lydia, for this great introduction. I'm really happy to be here today to tell you something about Agile testing with Tricentis Tosca in today's MOOC. I will jump to the agenda. We will first start with the test-driven development, some backgrounds and history. We will go to Agile structures in Tosca. Then I will do a live Agile demo in Tricentis Tosca. Then we will see continuous testing is mandatory. And at the end, we will do some transformation information about Agile testing and waterfall testing and the service virtualization. All right, we will start with the test-driven development. Where it all began, the specification by example. We use realistic examples as a single source of truth for requirements and automated tests on software projects. So that was kind of the specification that was introduced 1996. So test-driven development itself started 1999. And it's about setting concrete detailed expectations of code behavior. And this leads to a fully automated suite of unit tests. So its unit tests do not necessarily reflect the expected business behavior. So it's really a programmer's discipline and not a tester's discipline. So it's a little different to what we expect when we talk about Agile testing right now. If we go to behavior-driven development, this is a kind of a software development methodology, and it's which an application is specified and designed by describing how its behavior should appear to an outside observer. So it's kind of not a testing discipline, it's more like a programming language in a real English. It's like given when then, so the cucumber language. So behavior-driven development is more a business discipline and is very often delegated to business testers. So, but it's still not what we are looking for. And what we are looking for is acceptance test-driven development. That is what we're really looking for. And this is a practice in which the whole team collaboratively discusses acceptance criteria with examples. So we can still use the given when-then language like behavior-driven development, but the whole team is involved and discusses the acceptance criteria for the tests and and even discussing the requirement itself. So don't confuse acceptance test-driven development with test-driven development. As I said before, it's a programming practice, not a testing practice. So start writing a failing executable unit test that demonstrates the existing code base does not currently possess some capability. So it's really to start a unit test that should fail, and you program or you write code until it doesn't fail anymore. So it's really everything about unit testing, and the production code make this test pass. So when the test is passing, the development cleans up the code again, refactoring out duplications, making the source code more readable and improving the design. So it really involves working in very small steps, so small unit levels at a test time, and it results in a fully automated suite of unit tests. So it's still unit tests and it's not functional business tests. So still bear in mind that those unit tests are kind of a side effect and not the ultimate goal. So it's really about setting up concrete detailed expectations of code behavior in advance to guide the implementation, and not really what the business user is expecting from this program or from this application. So what we are looking for is acceptance test-driven development, and this is a practice in which the whole product team collaboratively discusses acceptance criteria with examples and then distills them into a set of concrete acceptance tests before development starts. So that's the specification from Elizabeth Hendrickson. And this means that we are involving the test creation before the implementation, and these tests represent expectations of behavior the software should have. And it's not code behavior, it's really business behavior. So the acceptance level tests are discussed and captured when the team is working with the business stakeholders to understand a user story on the backlog. So typical business stakeholders, you might know them, it's the product owners, it's the customers, or it's the business analyst. It really depends on your programming approach. So for Scrum, it would be the product owner and so on. So a typical business stakeholder is a person with the responsibility and the authority to specify the requirements for the software under development. So it specifies the what, while the implementation team specifies the how. So that's what the business stakeholders is about. So in order to succeed in your mission, you must have single-minded devotion to your goal. The overarching goal is to create a shared understanding of the requirements, and acceptance test-driven development forces the whole product team to come to a concrete agreement about the exact behavior of the software. So it's not that just one team is verified, it's really about the entire product team. And everything is about communication, collaboration, and clarity. So hence, it is per definition an integral part of any Agile development methodology. It is a forwarded thinking philosophy. As a result, the resulting software becomes more testable in general. So the tests are easy to add, and the test team is an integral part of that process. So it's really more bringing the test to the development and bringing even the business to the development. So it's really to collaborate while creating the requirements and the tests for sure. So further, the resulting manual or automated regression test portfolio reflects, in this case, the business-facing expectations, and thereby provides valuable and fast feedback. Hence, it's far more a cultural challenge than a tool challenge. So it's really not depending on the tool, it's really about more the cultural approach and behavior during an implementation. So acceptance test stream development is a testing practice, not a programming practice compared to the test stream development. Alright, let's start with the acceptance test driven cycle model. The general procedure, so the big picture, reveals a simple recipe. In the sprint planning meeting, where you can see here, you're discussing the requirements, the user stories, with the stakeholders and with the development. In the next phase, you're designing your acceptance tests. So it's really designing on a logical level, and it shifts the test to a level that can be discussed with the business stakeholders and the development. So it's really an easy to read living documentation in BDD style, so behavior-driven development, and exemplary specification to create the shared understanding here, that everyone knows what this test is about and what is really needed from the application itself. So hand the acceptance level tests over, so hand the acceptance tests level over to enable the test stream development, so the development can still do the unit test and distill it from it. So it's really between acceptance tests, so the functional tests and the unit tests. In the end, you will do the automation and the execution here, the delivery, to enable automated acceptance test stream development, so AATDD, to create an executable documentation, and you really learn constantly via the feedback and in cooperation with the test case portfolio and so on. So in every sprint review, you will see how the progress is and how it works. When we talk about Tosca, we can now do kind of an overlay. So the first discussion, the user stories, are fitting to the requirement section. So if you have already seen Tosca, we have these sections in Tosca, like the requirements, the test case design, the test cases, and the execution section. And you can see these overlays right in here. So we have like the discussion, what we had before, like the conceptual model. So why to test at all, the capture and structure, prioritization of the products, even the weighting of the product, so you can, the risk-based weighting, everything will be in here to get the test coverage. And the next step will be to jump to the test case design and do some acceptance level tests. That's in Tosca's test case design section, as I just mentioned, and it's really about the acceptance criteria, and it can be done in the given when-then style or in any style you prefer. It's not an automated test case, it's really just a specification of the test case. So the next step would be to create a concrete model, so automate the scenarios via Tosca's template concept in order to enable automated acceptance test stream development. This will be this cycle here to really create automated tests in Tosca and let it run until it passes. In the end, you can scale your test execution, like distributed execution, integrate the tests maybe to continuous integration, to provide fast and valuable feedback, so you can do daily releases, you can do weekly releases, whatever you can execute as often you want and as much you want in here. Here is a Tricentis Tosca versus Cucumber gherkin usage compare. So what you see here is gherkin cucumber. So many of you have already seen that we have the given when-then. So given the customer has purchased a cattle for £10 and they have the receipt, when the sales assistant processes the refund, then the stock inventory for cattle is incremented by 1 and the customer's card is credited by £10. If we bring it in Tosca, it's an insurance sample in here what you can see here is the given when then again. So what we have here given is an insurance and typical insurance. When insurance details are valid for 5 years, then the verification point would be the quote price per anno is £550. So the core conclusion is Tosca is not better GPA for a cucumber. So Tosca supports the idea of BDD in its entirety. So it's really about that Tosca is not really using just one language. It's really about you can decide what to be used. And in the sections you really have a clear separation, like the requirements, you have the scenarios, you have the automated test cases, you have the execution list. So you really can have a separated view on each of these objects. And the Tosca shows you the scenarios are very clear and easy to read and easy to maintain arrangement. The entire ATDD testing cycle is traceable, so all components are seamlessly integrated. So that's the big advantage in Tosca, that everything is traceable, and you can even jump to any object because all the objects are connected. You will later see this in the live demo, that you can jump from one object to the next, and you can even specify the sections, like for the management, for the testers, for the teams, whatever. So it's really very flexible. And you have an easy to use export facility like Microsoft Excel, or an API for the bidirectional integration of any ALM tool or an IDE. Alright, let's go to the structuring in Tosca. How to structure your Agile portfolio in Tricentis Tosca. So, when talking about requirements management, so the requirement section in Tosca, you always have like a product backlog with your user stories listed. And if you would like to structure it like in the Scrum process, it's like that you have some epics, and above those epics you have some themes. And you can decide how many groupings you want to have, if you want to do kind of a strict Scrum process, or if you would like to do like a combination of more Agile approaches. What you can do in Tosca is, or what you should do is, you really recommend to have like a product backlog and a sprint backlog, because it's always a little different if you want to see your product or if you want to see your sprint. So in your sprint you really have your user stories in here listed. In your products you have, I would say at max, some epics or some themes inside. So there is never a user story that should be mentioned in here. There are always some exceptions, so maybe you have some important user stories, but I would say usually you just have some epics in here. Jumping to the next level would be that we have like the tests itself. So if we have created tests for our user stories, so that our user stories are covered fully, then we decide what tests should be taken to the product view to be in the regression portfolio. So in here you will just have normally regression tests and tests that are really necessary to be executed more often, not just once. In here you have maybe some manual tests, some exploratory tests, whatever. It's all about the execution during a sprint, but not later than the sprint. If you have more than just one team, then you can structure it like for Agile Team 1, you have the sprint view, and then you have like for each team the same view. So each team can see their user stories and their requirements, and then the most important tests will go to the product view and will cover the product itself, and you will have kind of a governance view for the main goal. So this is just the intermediate goals, and here you really have your main goal. The Agile requirements management, I think many of you know this already. It's about the risk-based weighting, it's about the requirement section in Tosca, where you really can see in the product view what is covered at how many percentage, and this is like based on the risk, what you have weighted. So like the client-side validation is covered for only 27%. And here you will see like 60% are green, 2 are red, and 6 are white, and so on. So the Agile requirements management can even have some end-to-end views. What we see here is the management view. So this is not only about one product, it's really about more products. You have the securities trading, maybe you have some more products in here, and there you really can see the enterprise goal. So you really can have one view above the views before, and there you will have your themes like securities trading, product 1, 2, 3, to have your product goals. And you can even have that many levels what you like to have. Alright. So that was a long theoretical part, and now we will jump right into Tosca to show you how this really can look like and how this really works. As I mentioned before, we will start in the requirements section. My application is called All-in-One App, and as a short form I have here AIO, and I mentioned this on all the levels. You should always do it like that, because then you will see in your tabs names, you will always see your right names, and you will never get confused if you have like 3 test cases folders and you don't know the project anymore. So it really helps to see that I'm in the right folder. So if we have a look here in the requirement section, like we have our products in here, we have the finance product, we have the HR product, and we have an insurance product. Alright, so if we go to the insurance product, then we will see a sprint view, we will have a product view, and we will even have the regression view. So all the regression tests can come into this requirement. If we open the sprint view, you will have your releases, like release 1, release 2. And even in the releases, you will have your Scrum teams and your sprints. So what we can see here right now is like that we have 67% of our first sprint is already executed green. 33 are not executed yet, and even not executed yet, it's really not covered. So what you see here is it's not covered yet. We can have a look inside. So what we see here is user story 11 is not covered yet. So the sprint is not really fulfilled, but still they are working on sprint 2. So what you see is that we have covered it fully. So it's 100% green, and sprint 3 is 100% red. So it's maybe just starting. And that can be read in a sprint view and even for the Scrum teams. The same for the second team. So it's really like that you have your teams listed in here, and that you can see even the progress of your sprints, and even the management can see this, because you can do like reporting on every section in Tosca, and that the management can have like an overview about the sprints and so on. If we jump right into the insurance products, then we will see our products, like the global product. No, it's not really a global product, it's really the global requirements for all the products. So we have the home insurance, the life insurance, and the vehicle insurance. If we look into the vehicles insurance, you will see here that the car insurance is already covered very well. It's 97% covered, and the other insurances are not covered yet. based on the weighting, you will see already it's not that bad that it's not covered, because car insurance, the weight is much higher than all the other twos. So we have here a really high weight, and that leads us to kind of a good coverage on this level in here. If this is not true for your product, you can do any weighting. Like if we say, okay, we have to reduce the weight, reduce it, and even the top level will decrease dramatically. Right, I'll just go back again. And if we go to the regression, then we have here our regression results, and we will see that the regression test was already successful, and you have even the execution list linked to the requirements section, that we get even these results in here. Alright, the next step, like the design phase, is then in the red section. We will have kind of the same structure like in the requirements. We have a sprint view, we have a product view. In the sprints, again, we have our releases, we have our sprints, the user stories, and there you can even define, like, I want to do an exploratory session. So you can just do a placeholder for the user story 1. And if you have no real test case, doesn't matter, you can just mention this in here. It's just that you have covered user story 1 in here, and you have kind of a design for it. So this can be done in test case design, but it gets even more interesting if you go to the products, because then you will have like your insurances again, like the car insurance. There we have the new codes, maintain codes, existing codes, and so on. So all your templates or your, I would say, use cases will be in here, and your test cases will be there. So if you go to new codes, then we will have given an insurance, like a typical insurance. We'll even do best fit all columns in here. So it's like a typical insurance, valid like 5 years, then the code has to be 550, whatever. So you really have your test cases listed next to each other, and you really see which test case is testing in here. So that is like typical test case design in Tosca. But if we go back here, you will see that this is part of the product view, and this is really important to specify and design your requirements and your user stories to be like implemented in here. Alright, so then we will jump to the test cases section. In the test cases section, you will see again the same structure. It's really important that you have the same structure everywhere, because that you see or that you find the right things in the right place. And it's really needed, because if you have like user stories in the sprints, you will need the templates in the sprints, and it's even a totally different template in here. If we have a look at the vehicle insurance, we will have the template for car insurance, for the truck insurance, for the bike insurance. We even have an end-to-end scenario here for the car insurance. So it's really important to have different views, and even these test cases will be then used in the requirement section in a certain section, like the vehicle insurance. We have like car insurance, and this would be this template where we can use these test cases to be executed and even to be reflected in the requirement section. Okay, so if you want to do some exploratory testing, you can do this for sure. So if you like want to have sprints for your, not sprints, if you want to have some exploratory sessions in your sprint, then you have the critical session, you have the happy path session, for example. So you can do any session what you want. You can define the users for it, and then you can do the testing for the sprint, and then you will see the results in the specific session for sure. So if we have double click in here, you will see, okay, that's already covered, like 67% already passed, 33% are failed. So the critical session is still not has not successfully been executed yet. So there is still some potential things to be improved for sure. And that's about the exploratory sessions. In the products view, for sure, you can do this. Can do the same, but I think it's more likely to really do the exploratory testing not in the product section, but in the sprint section. If we jump to the execution list itself, we will have now our main overview of execution. So the products can be listed in here, so it's not about the weighting anymore, it's really about number of test cases. So it's really about how many test cases are already have been executed in here. So you see home insurance has not been tested yet, life insurance once, vehicle insurance for 6 test cases, and so on. So we really see the product view, and you can even list the test phases, the unit test, the integration test. So this is something you can structure it in Tosca as you like, so there are no limits when you want to structure things in Tosca. And here as well, for sure, the sprints. So that's really important that you have sprint test mandates, and these test mandates can be linked to an execution list, and even can be linked to a products execution list, or to kind of an overview execution list that you just built here. An execution list like sprint overview, and there you can then list all your test cases you want to have in here, and these mandates are then linked to the execution list of the sprint overview. So it's really just a suggestion, and you really have to think about how this could fit in your environment and how to use Tosca in your Agile environment in the right way. But I think that really works good. If we jump to the insurance regression portfolio, here the same. This is just a test mandate. You always see this on this tool that is included in the icon. And there, this tool again is a link to the execution list. So we have the vehicle insurance and the life insurance in here. So this is linked in here. You have like an arrow, and there you will see it's linked to the sprints. And even linked to the insurance regression. So if I change any result in here, it will be changed in the execution list as well. So if we just set the result to failed, okay, manually failed, then you will already see, okay, 2 test cases have been failed, and this is already been changed in here, and even will be changed in the requirement section. So if we jump right back to the vehicle insurance, we will see here more red than before. So maybe just go back, you will already see it jumps down to 12%, and if we let it fail again, I will just do a redo, then you will see, okay, that's 25% right now. So everything is linked in Tosca. Maybe you have already seen this before. So it's really about the Tosca cycle. You see all the sections in here. We just started the requirements, test case design, test cases, execution list. We skipped the modules because modules is always a little different. The module section is always like, how does your product look like? And it's not so much about sprints or any planning, because in the module section you should find your screens. If you scan your screens and you know your application, you should be able to find the right modules in your section. So that's about the structuring in Tosca. And in the end, in the requirement section, you can always have some overviews. Like if you would like to see in the end how was my regression going, then you will see, okay, my finance regression, my HR regression, my insurance regression. So the virtual folders bring you all the views you want to have, and it's based on the TQL, so the Tosca query language, which gives you any possibilities to really show what you expect, and that you can search for any object in Tosca and even for any property in Tosca. So maybe we just open here again the products view to see if there is anything inside, but unfortunately we don't have any products views yet. Alright, let's go to the lifecycle integration. So how can I use Tosca right now in the Agile process? If we have our sprint start and the sprint end, that is always a defined range. We have our unit and smoke tests, we have our builds. So you can build every day, maybe every hour, or like very new platforms in the internet are building like every 5 minutes. So it's really, that's the real Agile, I would say. And you can do your testing. So for the builds, for sure, if you have your user stories built before, you have to build your test case design. So this can be done before the sprint, or even in the sprint start, that you just finalize your test case design, because it's just a specification. You don't need any code for the test case design. Then you can do some exploratory sessions. In these exploratory sessions, you can make some checks, like non-functional tests, like some tryouts, whatever. You can invite people to test. You can even use the exploratory feature from Tosca, so that you can test without Tosca. So we have kind of a standalone version that you just need a connection to the exploratory server. And if you would like to, or if you already have some automated tests, you should test for sure every day, or maybe more than that, so that you really do your automation, and in the end some sprint acceptance test until the sprint ends. For all of this, continuous testing is mandatory. So Agile development needs continuous testing. When we want to transform the testing pyramid, so that's the, I would say, legacy pyramid, where you have your huge portfolio of end-to-end tests, where all of your business employees have to test for days, weeks, or even months. You have kind of a small integration test and some tiny unit tests that the developers are writing right now. We want to do a shift left, and we want to shift this pyramid, that we have the Agile test pyramid. So we want to strengthen the unit tests, that we have more unit tests already, even automated for sure. Then we have a big amount of integration tests in your integration environment. Then your system integration tests. And in the end, we will have a small user acceptance test. Maybe you can do 2 to 3 end-to-end tests, but at all it should be really a small part, because business people have so much things to do besides testing, so it should really be kind of a side task and not the main task of the business. Should not be testing. If you're using continuous integration, Tosca has some integration options. So we can connect Tosca with a build tool. A build tool can be like Jenkins, where you connect the Tosca CI client, and then Tosca communicates with this client and is doing the execution. When you're creating your builds, Tosca will be started and executes your test cases. To execute this in big environments, we introduced distributed execution. So the distributed execution helps you to not communicate to all your Tosca clients. It's just that you have to communicate to your distribution server. So the build tool is using the CI client, and the CI client is connected to the distribution server, and then all the executions will be started right from the distribution server and not separately. Maybe you have already seen this continuous delivery pipeline from Tosca, where we have like the planning, the coding, the versioning, the building, the provisioning, deploying and reporting, and in the middle we have the huge testing. So what we do is, like, first we integrate, then we do some tests, we do the explore, manage, we do the virtualization, the automation, and even the distributed execution, the reporting, and the monitoring. So Tosca is connected from the beginning to the end and gets like started and even gets the reporting back to Tosca, and you can have a test management tool in your Agile environment. When we talk about Agile environment, it's always, if you have kind of a huge development, that you have a transformation from the waterfall teams to the Agile teams, and you always have kind of, I would say, a confusion in between. On the one side, we have our Agile teams that are delivering and releasing every 2 weeks, or maybe the sprints. So we have our sprints and the releases. And on the other hand, we have our waterfall teams. These teams are building releases like every 1 or 2 months. And if you do testing, you need some information to test, and you have to sync them. So we have the new old wall of confusion in between, and we really have to make sure that we test the right versions, and that we test at the right moment the right release from the waterfall team. So we need some people from the Agile environments to do our, I would say, legacy tests to get the new releases and to have the synchronization in the right place. If we have these environments, it always depends on the size, I would say, but still we have some dependencies of systems. We have our systems in here, and sometimes it happens that system B and C is not available. So therefore we have the service virtualization, and for service virtualization we will have more details in the upcoming MOOCs. That's it from my side. I will now hand over again to Lydia.
Thank you very much, Helmut, for this very interesting demonstration on Agile testing in Tosca. We are now at the point where we can answer some of your questions.
Right.
As I mentioned at the beginning, we did keep a few questions from the session to answer in detail at the end of the presentation so that everyone can profit from the answers. Let's go to those now. So one of the questions was, when we use BDD, is it a must to use Gherkin?
No, I just mentioned it at the beginning. Many people use Gherkin for it, but it's not a must. Tosca supports it, but Tosca even supports any notation, so it's not really needed that you use Gherkin for it.
Alright, and the next question is, we do testing in-house, but the development is done by a third-party company. Is this a blocker for using Agile?
No, it's not a blocker, but you should consider to change some of your life cycle stages and tasks to support the Agile process in its optimal way. So it's more like if you have your deliveries, so it really depends when does your software gets delivered. So which stages can you see and which stages can you test? So it might be that you have to change it a little, but still you can go Agile.
Okay, thanks for that. Another question is, shall we automate all test cases that are built during a sprint?
New features can be tested via exploratory sessions, and then we recommend to do some risk-based grading. Then you can decide on the risk what test cases to be automated, and manual testing will not be completely replaced, but with Tosca you can keep manual and automated test cases in one place, and that's a big advantage.
Okay, and the next question, is it mandatory that everyone in the Agile team is working with Tosca?
Yeah, that's a good question as well. A recommendation from our side is to select some members of the Agile team as kind of Tosca experts, and this should be sufficient for, let's say, 2 to 3 people. It depends on the team size, but that these people are working with Tosca and that they are kind of familiar with it.
Okay, and another question. Who can support us in starting such an Agile testing process in our company?
Yes, we have many options to support you. On one side we have like MOOC sessions, we have many white papers and so on, but if you really want to start, we can even support you on site, so please let us know if you would like to start this Agile testing with Tosca. Our services department will be very happy to support you during this planning and setup phase.
Okay, thank you very much. I think that's all we have time for today. Apologies if we didn't get around to answer your question. You can always reach us by email. I'd like to remind you of our next MOOC, When UI and API Testing Meets Service Virtualization. That's coming up on December 13th. And as always, we will have 2 sessions to cover the different time zones. You can already register for this MOOC on our website. Also, I'd like to kindly ask you to please complete the feedback at the end of the session. And the only thing left for me to do now is to guide you if you need any further assistance. If your questions weren't answered in the MOOC, let's have a look to see where you may be able to find answers to those questions, like Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, YouTube, Tosca in a heartbeat. Thank you very much for joining us, and goodbye.